New month, new list. So this is the tier list for April 2023. Now, as far as how the format's been, like I said last time, it's in a pretty good spot. I feel like we're in the format where you can top with anything. And I don't know if you know this, but someone actually topped with Monarchs. You heard me? I said Monarchs. I don't know how that happened, but it happened. And there has been definitely some changes in the meta. A few slight changes. But without further ado, let's get right into it. So as we got the tier 1, 1.5, 2, Rogue, and everything else. So first up, we got Marin sus. This deck gets a top every so often. It's a solid rogue deck, I would say. It tops consistently enough for that. I can't really put it any higher because Marin sus can be a bit glass canny if, well, that's not even a word. It can be a bit of a glass cannon because once you get rid of the Argonaut, you don't really have a whole lot of follow-up plays. But with it being unaffected, a lot of times that doesn't really even matter. Spriggans they got another top. Still a very solid deck, but I wouldn't say it's probably quite as good as Marin sus. While it can use stuff like Therion, and obviously it got the new Sargus, which is really good. It can still be a bit bricky at times as a deck. Although there are definitely ways to kind of fix that, which is why it topped, but I still think it needs just a little bit more to be higher than this. At Ignister, my opinions have not changed. To me, Ad Ignister is even more of a glass cannon than Marin sus. Break their board, they have no follow-up. Brigade. Brigade, I put it in a rogue. The way the format's going, I feel like this is a deck that can definitely get wins. Well, I wouldn't say it's in the higher tiers. So that's still a solid deck. Dragon Link. This is actually one deck that surprised me. I think I had it in like everything else last time, like pretty far down. But it's actually been getting consistent tops. Which is pretty surprising, considering Bestials are kind of all over the place. But honestly, I feel like it's between a tier 1.5 and a tier 2. So it's definitely a lot better than Marin sus. I'd put it in probably like a tier 2, I would say. Like a very high tier 2. Next is Labyrinth. I feel like this went down slightly. Like before, for me, the best decks of the format were Branded Despia, Castro, and Labyrinth. And that's still a bit true, but as Labyrinth has become more popular, the ways to add it become more popular as well. And of course, this deck loses to stuff like Denko, World Decree. And I feel like Brandon and Castro are just above Labyrinth, but Labyrinth is still a very solid deck, and you do need to know about it. Speaking of Branded Despia, this one's really hard. I feel like I'm actually going to put it in tier 1.5. Well, I think it's better than Labyrinth. I don't think it's like at the top. The way I feel like this format is going, Branded Despia is going to fall off slightly because people, they're prepared for Labyrinth. They're prepared for Castro. they're prepared for branded Despia. But there's a lot of decks that they are not prepared for, and which have allowed other decks to kind of take their place slightly. Flounderies, still a very solid rogue deck. It's like a very high rogue tier 2 kind of deck. I'd say this is more of like a kind of like a tier 2 in the same levels of like Dragon Link. Dragon Link's like slightly better, but I'd say Flounderies is better than Marin stuff, so it's kind of like in the middle. Virtual World has been like non-existent. Mech Knight's got top. Mech Knight Evoke to be exact, which is a bit surprising, but is that going to continue? No. Even if it ends up becoming a very popular deck, it's just such an easy deck to counter. Drytron has actually seen a little bit of resurgence. So I definitely think that's a solid rogue deck. Outlich, I can't really put it any higher. When you got a trap deck that's very popular like Labyrinth, a lot of people are going to be citing stuff for back row and floodgates like Denko and Royal Decree, which of course is going to hit Eldritch. So Labyrinth being a very popular meta deck means Eldritch is going to be a lot easier to deal with because you're not really going to be getting people by surprise as much because they're already going to have the outs for it. ABC got top, although technically it's ABC, Therion, Adventure, a lot of different stuff. Unfortunately, I can't really put it much higher than a rogue. But Therion and Adventure are actually starting to become more popular engines again. So this one could see a rise. I wouldn't put it any higher than rogue. More or less just because how Adventure and Therion and how good they are. Dolce, I think it's a solid rogue deck. Honestly, I put more trust in Dolce than I do Virtual World and Adagnister. Hell, I actually was even playing a Dolce deck that I just threw together and won against Trap Tricks. So this is definitely a deck that can still compete. Then again, it's kind of always been a deck that's just existed. Like, I feel like once every month or 2 months, there will become a Dolce top and then nothing again for like the next 1 or 2 months. Fur Hire got top, although in more in the form of like Fur Hire Runic. Runic has been seeing a lot of increase in play. But I don't think the Fur Hire version is really going to be the one that's going to be at the top. Plunder Patrol, can't really put it much high. Same with Thunder Dragons. Although actually, I'm going to put Thunder Dragons a bit higher. If Dragon Link becomes more popular, then Thunder Dragon will just become more popular as a result of Dragon Link. Just because Bestials become better. Next we got Salamangrates, another very solid rogue deck. You can get top with it from time to time, but expecting it to go like, it can go toe to toe with most of the top decks, but it's always going to be an uphill battle. Next is Castro. Castro's basically doing the opposite of what I thought last list. Like during the last list, I'm like, Castro is pretty solid, but I feel like people are figuring out the weaknesses to it, and it's going to fall off a little. Yeah, the exact opposite of that happened. I still don't think the deck is really anything too impressive, which, in my opinion, is what makes this current format so good. Like, all the top decks have clear and easy outs. Raigeki, solid. Lightning Storm, solid. Harpy's Feather Duster, D-Barrier. There are so many cards that can out the top decks. Sky Striker, a solid rogue deck. feel like it's pretty much always going to be a solid rogue deck. But it is getting some new support. Again, I really wish they'd stop making Sky Striker support and just release the other cards further. Like, you can take Engage further off the list. Or you can put multi-roll to 3. I don't think that will really change much of anything. Mathmex is becoming a very solid deck. It's getting a lot of consistent tops. So it's definitely a deck you're going to want to know how to play. And that's, I think, the reason why Mathmex is topping so much. Mathmex, like when I go against it, I have no clue what they're doing. Because Mathmex is just a deck I don't know what it does. I don't know how to play against it. I don't know what its weak points are. And I feel like that's how Mathmex sort of plays. Like, people don't really know what it does, and it just catches so many people by surprise. But as they continue to top more and more, people get more familiar with it, which means it'll go down a little bit. So I can't really put it anywhere higher right now. But it's definitely still a solid deck. Like, it's getting wins against all these decks, though. Runic Naturia. Actually, I'm going to put it in the tier 1. Honestly, this deck is seeing a lot of increase in popularity. More or less because it's kind of like a deck that just does not die. And the Naturia cards definitely make this deck so much better, especially cards like the Naturia Sunflower, which basically gives you 2 negates. This deck is absolutely insane. I've gone against it, and it is just a pain to face. Dinos, solid rogue deck. I feel that's all it will ever be. Exo Sister, since we're not in too much of a Grave Reliant format, I'm not really expecting much of it, but it's definitely a deck that can still top. Heroes, I don't even take them seriously at this point. Generators. Now, this might be a bit of a hot take, but I'm actually going to put this in tier 2. Because this is a deck I've actually been working with a lot right now. And honestly, it surprises me a lot. Like, I've gone against all the top decks. Castro, Branded Despia, Labyrinth, Sword Soul, Runic Naturia. And I've never been blown out in any of those games. I don't think I've even lost a Sword Soul. There's a lot of hidden potential in this deck, and a lot of people don't really know how to play against this deck, kind of in the same way as Mathmech. And I know a lot of people keep making the same exact mistake with Leviathan. Like, I'll tribute it for a cost, and then they'll let it resolve, and then they realize, oh, wait a second. It's Leviathan that's giving the Boss of Eternity materials. Trap Tricks, Rogue. Look, I know Trap Tricks is topping. I know it's a cheap and easy deck. But that doesn't mean it's like a tier 1 deck. Sure, it's a solid structure deck, definitely go get it. You know, put it together and you can win a local. But Trap Tricks has lots of flaws, and like in the forms of the top decks, it loses to the exact same cards. Summon a Denko. Well, I'll keep Trap Tricks in check. Royal Decree to an extent. Like, honestly, I see people playing this deck a lot. Like, when you got a good structure deck, I feel like that's just kind of what happens. But I just don't really think it's anything to really worry about. Next, Invoked. It got top, but I don't really think that's going to continue. Sword Soul, again, another very solid tier 2 deck. It was a little bit higher last time. I think it was like a tier 1.5. It went down kind of a little bit. It had a slight resurgence, but as I keep saying, the things that keep these decks in check also keep Sword Soul in check. D-Barrier, Call Synchros, boom, they're done. And Sword Soul is a deck, if you know how to play against it, it's very easy to beat. Rika Fairy Sun Outlaw. This is a deck that's becoming very popular. And I feel like this is going to be a high rogue. This is like kind of like, I feel like borderline tier 2. Honestly, I'll probably put it at tier 2. I trust Rika Sun Outlaw more than I do Trap Tricks or Drytron. And I've actually been seeing like different builds like a Therion, because I believe a Lilybell is a plant, so you can play Therions in this too. Dark Worlds. Again, another solid structure deck, but it's not your best option. There are a lot of weaknesses in this deck, and Droll is seeing a little bit more play, so that like counters this deck 100%. You activate Droll in this deck, they basically lose the game. Almost the same with Runics. Tierlist. Still solid rogue deck. It'll get his top here and there. But I'm just losing confidence in this deck. Sprites. Tier 1. Yeah, Runic and Sprite are two decks that have definitely been seeing a large resurgence. Sprite actually doesn't lose to the same things as a lot of the other decks. Deep Barrier, it's a hindrance, but it doesn't kill the deck. Board Breakers, kind of the same thing. Like, they have a Sprite Carrot, which is a or not non-negate, but Spell and Trap Negate, which some of these other decks don't have. So this is definitely a deck that you do want to be prepared for. Like I'd say, I feel like these three decks right here are the decks that are going to be the most challenging to go against. Because you can even play some of the cards I mentioned, and they can still play around them. Evil Eye got top, which is pretty cool, but I don't really think that's going to continue. Next is Scareclaw. Again, like fairly solid rogue deck. So this is what I think of the tier list. Tier 1, the best decks of the format. Tier 1.5 are the decks that are kind of like a slightly out of the format. Like I feel like this is like the top 5 decks of the format. Sword Soul, Dragonlink, Flounderies, Backpack, Rika Sun Outlaw, and Generators are decks that are going to be very popular, or decks you need to keep an eye on. Although the Generators is kind of my own personal opinion. And all these decks right here are decks that have the potential to top, I would say. So that's all for this video. Let me know in the comments. Is there any decks I missed? And I'll see you in the next video I make. Bye.